Everybody gather in here and then we'll start. Go ahead and open up your Bibles to Exodus 5. Exodus 5 is where we'll be. It's been a little bit since we've been in Exodus. We had a guest speaker last Wednesday, and then we had another one on Sunday. So hopefully you guys remember what has happened in 4 chapters. What's been going on so far in the book of Exodus? Not everybody at once. Pharaoh says no. Yeah, in the last couple chapters, right, God's been talking to Moses and talking him into doing what he needs him to do. And what is it that God needs Moses to do? Go talk to Pharaoh, right? Go save his people. Okay, what's going on with the Israelites in Egypt? Slavery, right? Been about 400 years now. Remember, Joseph's whole family comes on down, and then they stay there because of the famine going on in the land. And now they're multiplied to millions of people. We estimate anywhere between 2 to 2.5 million people. And they've been slaves for about 400 years now. And so God calls Moses. Now, how old is Moses at this point? 80 years old. Okay, I'm not 80, I'm halfway there. Jim, if God talked to you in a burning bush, Jim pointed to himself, so I get to pick on him. And God looked at you and said, hey, Jim, I want you to go to China. You got a lot of excuses, right? I think a lot of times we look at Moses and we just say, oh, look at all these excuses he comes up with, but I'm 40 and I don't want to do half the stuff, right? I mean, imagine you're 80 years old and God says, I have a plan for you. I have a mission for you. And I want you to go to the most powerful nation that is abusing my people, and I want you to tell them, set them free, let them go, right? Because I have heard their cries. Would you really be willing to be like, yeah, let's go ahead and do this, God? No, right? You're going to have an excuse, right? You can sit there and say, well, no, I'd say all the right things, but in your brain you're thinking, no way am I doing this, right? So that brings us now to chapter 5. Now, who is helping Moses? God sends somebody to help Moses. Who does he send to help him? His brother Aaron. And that's going to be very important, right? What is Aaron to Moses? And what is Moses to Aaron? God tells him. He says, you're going to be like this to your brother. God, right? Just like I am to you, Moses, you are going to be to Aaron. In other words, I'm telling you what to say, Moses, and you're going to tell Aaron what to say, right? You want to sit there and say, oh, I'm not a good speaker? Well, fine. We'll go do away with this. I'll let your brother speak for you. Why is that important when it comes to Pharaoh? How does Pharaoh talk to people? Does Pharaoh just have one-on-one conversations with his citizens? He talks like he's God, right? Because the people believe that Pharaoh is a god, an Egyptian god, a deity. And so the way he communicates to people is he has his messengers. He doesn't talk directly to them. He has his messengers. He tells his messengers what he wants, and then his messengers will go out to all the people and say, this is what Pharaoh proclaims. Now you all have to do it. Okay? And this is going to be very important as we get here into in Exodus 5. One other thing before we jump into the text here. Adam talked about something, not last Sunday, but 2 Sundays ago now. This phrase, hardening his heart. Right? God says, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. What does he mean by that? Yeah, he's going to provide the circumstances, right? Is God physically going to not give Pharaoh a choice? No, he always has a choice, right? But God also knows Pharaoh's heart, and he knows I can put him in situations that he's not going to like. Can he still respond in a repentant manner to those things? Yes, definitely. Would God want that? Yes. But again, what kind of man are we dealing with? What has this man done so far? He thinks he's a god, right? So I don't answer to anybody. I mean, if that doesn't tell you about somebody's personality, if somebody walked up to you and said, I'm a god, what would you think of them? Yes, Ron. Yeah, he's the ruler of the most powerful nation on earth, and he knows it, right? It's not a guess. He knows where he sits in the hierarchy of just the world in general, where him and his country sit. And what have we seen him do so far in Exodus? Yeah, he's enslaved people, right? He's carried on from his fathers, this tradition of enslaving people, making them work, making them labor. He's carried on the tradition of killing the babies, the first, all the males. So is this like just a good guy who God's picking on? No, right? This guy has some issues to begin with, and God is just going to use his issues against him. All right, any other comments on that before we jump into the text? Yes?
So, one other perspective you think about in terms of Pharaoh, we know that God controls all governmental powers. He rules over everything. And so, there's times in scripture where we're told that certain things occur, people are in this place, so that the glory of God will be revealed. So if we keep this in mind, this Pharaoh is in a position that he's about to be humbled, so that the glory of God will be revealed. Right? So this is part of God's plan, part of his purpose in showing the world who he is.
Yeah, exactly, right. Think about it this way, right? If Moses walked in there and said, hey, the God of Israel says, let my people go, and Pharaoh goes, you know what, you're right, go ahead. And they go. What would all the people, all the nations around them say then? Would they say, oh, God saved Israel? No, what would they say? They say, Pharaoh saved Israel. Pharaoh let them go. And in fact, you even see it later when they actually enter the land. What's one of the things Rahab says to the spies? Remember, this is 40 years after wandering around in the wilderness. What's one of the things she tells the spies? She says, we have heard what your God has done, right? We've heard this is 40 years after all the great plague stuff, and still everybody knows this is what Yahweh, God of Israel, has done. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the text. Somebody read verses 1 through 5. Oh, yes, Ron. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and exactly right. Does it diminish what God has done, though? No. Does it diminish their turmoil, right? I mean, if you're a slave for 200 or 400, you're still enslaved. But very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Exodus 5. If somebody could read verses 1 through 5 for me. Perfect. Oh, yeah, sorry, verse 5. Sorry. All right, excellent. Thank you, Scott. So one thing I want you to notice here in these first 5 verses, we kind of covered this a little bit in our last class. When you see the word Lord there in all capitals, mine has that, I'm sure most of them do. What are they actually signifying there? Remember, there's 2 terms or 2 usages of the word Lord, right? One is L-O-R-D, right, which is just master or king or whatever you want to say. And then there's another one, and most translations have it in all capitals. Why is it in all capitals? It's the formal name of God. right? That he gave, right? Remember when he said, I am, right? And so in the text, in the original Hebrew, that word is Yahweh, right? And so the translators, though, out of respect, and kind of started all the way back, right, with like King James and stuff like that, instead of writing the name of God, because they honored it and they revered it so much, they would write Lord, and they put it in all caps. So that way, if you read it, you knew. Now, I want you to look at those 5 verses, and how many times do you see Lord all capitalized there? Especially in those first 2 verses. 3, right? 3 times. So Moses and Aaron, they come up to Pharaoh, and what do they say? They say, thus says who? The Lord. Thus says Yahweh, God of Israel. Right? And then what's the request? Does he just say, release them permanently? What's the request he makes?
And that's one of the things that I was going to ask a question on. Adonai is substituted in the Tree of Life version that Adam was saying
Mm-hmm.
he liked. Is that a Greek form of Yahweh?
That's a question for Adam. So there you go. Did everybody get that? Everybody hear that? All right, perfect. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate that. Thanks for bailing me out. So he asked, though, right? The question, his request is, this is what Yahweh says. This is what Adonai says. He says, let my people go for 3 days to go out into the wilderness. And what's Pharaoh's response? Who is, right? Is that a legitimate question Pharaoh's asking? Yeah, right. Now, from what we know of Pharaoh, could he be also saying it in a derogatory way? Like, I'm going to ask this, but like, who is this? Right? Who is Yahweh that he commands me? Why would Pharaoh have that attitude? Because I'm a god, right? I'm a god. I know all the Egyptian gods. I'm on equal with them, and I've never heard of this guy. I've never heard of this God, right? So who is this that is, one, who is he? And then two, who is he to command me? Right? You can see the arrogance in that question. Who is he to tell me what I should and shouldn't do? And remember, how, more than likely from the text, how is this being said to Pharaoh? Is it Moses walking up to him and saying, let my people go? Who's? Yeah, and pomp and circumstance would dictate that Moses would make this request. But what did God say? Who's going to speak for you, Moses? Aaron. And remember how Pharaoh communicates to the common people through messengers. And now Moses is going to walk into the room, right? Which Pharaoh probably knows who he is because he was raised by the princess. Right? And he goes, Aaron, say this. And now Moses is talking to Aaron, and Aaron's relaying it to Pharaoh, the exact same way Pharaoh talks to the common people. How do you think Pharaoh's going to take that? Not very well, right? Yeah. Right, exactly. First off, Moses, who are you to have a messenger talk to me? And then secondly, who's your God that says this? In other words, I'm getting this 3 steps down from who's making this request. Any thoughts, comments on this idea? Yes?
I just want to say that we should realize that straw was used in
Yeah, and we're going to get into that too. We're going to get into the bricks here in just a little bit and how they're made. So you can see, though, right, when God says, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart, here's a perfect example of what God's doing. Can Pharaoh change his mind or make any choice he wants in this situation? Yes. But what is God doing to, quote, harden his heart? He's using his attitude against him. He's using his arrogance against him and saying, you're really going to have to humble yourself to do this. And it's that hard from somebody who thinks they're a god. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm a god, so I couldn't really answer it. But I would assume it's hard to be humbled.
With certain things.
Yep.
He lets people follow after their own beliefs. I think about, and I can't recall the right passage in mind, but when he says that they'll seek after their own
Devices, yeah.
devices. And so he lets them go after it, knowing that that's taking them farther away, but it's their choice.
Yep. Exactly, right? I think a lot of times we think, well, why doesn't God? Well, there's always free will. There's always free choice, right? And if you're willing to, and I'm going to do this, and God's going to say, fine, go ahead and do it, right? So Pharaoh, what does he accuse them of in the last few verses there? You're not wanting to go worship your God. You're wanting a what? You're wanting a vacation. You're wanting a long weekend, right? Why would you do this? Why would you even come to ask me? And so now we're going to see his great response to this. Somebody go ahead and read verses 6 through 14. Let's see what he does to the people because of this.
Then on the same day, Pharaoh commanded the slave masters of the people and their foremen, saying, you are not to give the people any more straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves, but impose on them the quota of bricks that they made previously. Don't reduce it, for they are lazy. That is why they cry out, saying, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let even heavier work be laid upon the men, so that they must labor, paying no attention to deceptive words. How far?
All the way to 14.
Then the slave masters of the people went out, along with their officers, and they spoke to the people, saying, this is what Pharaoh says, I will not give you straw. Go and get straw for yourselves, wherever you can find it, for there will be no reduction of your work. So the people were scattered throughout all of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. But the slave masters pressured, saying, fulfill your work, your daily amount, just as when there was straw. Moreover, the foremen of Israel, or Bid Israel, according to this version, from Pharaoh's slave masters had set over them, were beaten and asked, why haven't you met your quota of bricks, both yesterday and today, like before?
All right, perfect. Okay, so we have this battle going on right now between Yahweh God and Pharaoh, who thinks he's a god, right? And the battle is basically over whose people are these, right? God says, let my people go, and Pharaoh's going, no, they're my people. And I'm going to prove it to you that they're my people. So what does he do to punish Israel for what Moses and Aaron did? Makes it harder, okay. So Rob mentioned this a bit earlier. The way they make bricks, right, and they still do it today, actually. A lot of people still do it today. You basically get mud, right? You get dirt, you get some water, you get mud, and you get a whole bunch of straw, because that straw is what actually holds all the mud and everything together. It's very hard. It's very tedious work. Takes a lot of mixing and grinding and things like that, just getting it all in there. And then what you do is you put it in a mold, and then you let that mold sit out in the sun, and then dries, and then it becomes a brick. So what is Pharaoh's punishment for Israel? What does he say? No longer give you straw. The main ingredient that you need to make bricks, that we provide for you to do this, we're taking it away, and you still have to do what? Meet the quota, right? Has anyone here ever in a job been told to do more with less? Right? Yeah, if you've been in corporate America, yeah, that kind of reminds you of Egypt a little bit. But that's pretty much what Pharaoh's doing. Pharaoh's saying, I'm going to show Yahweh who I am. You want to sit here and tell me they're your people? Well, guess what I'm going to do to your people? I'm going to make their work harder. I'm going to take away the one thing that they really need. And you see there, so they go out, they tell them, hey, this is what happens. And now what are they doing to the people of Israel towards the end of that section there? To those who are over, so right, you have like the Israelites, and then you have, they're being beaten, right? The managers, if you will, right? You have the executives who are the Egyptians. You have the Israelites. Then you have middle management who are more Israelites who are just over other Israelites. And if they don't meet their quota, what happens? They get beat. And then they get asked a question. What's the question they're being asked? Why haven't you hit your quota? Right? You were doing this perfectly fine day in and day out, and now you can't. What's going on? Right? Any thoughts on this whole situation here? Nope, you're good.
If the Lord is making him make these bad decisions, that doesn't make sense. But yet he's just doing it to prove a point, right? It's like, how dare you? I'll even hurt myself in my building project just to prove my point, which makes no sense. But he's a God and he's been threatened.
Yeah, exactly, right? And what's funny, too, is especially if you know, like, Egyptians and Romans and Greeks, if you were a pharaoh or an emperor or a king, how did you really make your mark on history? It was really by the stuff you built, right? The stuff that would last for thousands of years, and then people would go, hey, Pharaoh so-and-so built these, or King so-and-so built this. And this guy's like, you know what? I know this will take longer. I know I won't, hit my deadlines or get done what I want done, but I'm still going to do it just to show that I can do it. And I can make these people suffer. Again, does this really sound like a guy who's wanting to repent and God's just not letting him? Yes, Alice?
It's like the man crying out for football.
Yeah.
It's proof of God, saying, like what God said he's going to harden his heart.
Yep.
And this is an example of how hard Pharaoh's heart was. That he's willing to sacrifice whatever's going to get him further ahead to make sure somebody else suffers. So that's a pretty prideful move, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. And do you guys even know people like that today? That would hurt themselves getting ahead or whatever just to prove a point? Yeah, cut your nose off to spite your face, right? Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yep. People will do that. Yes. They will hurt themselves just to prove a point, right? I am God. You're not. So, right, I'll hurt myself.
Government or even CEOs or sounds like that to me. It's like God doesn't have to force you to sin. All he has to do is present you with an option. And if you're prideful enough, you're going to say, I'm good.
Right. And the thing is, too, right, we look at Pharaoh kind of like this extreme example, but do we ever do that to ourselves today when God asks us to do something? Right? We look at Pharaoh and we say, oh, how could he not have done, right? How could he make these choices? But does God give us choices day in and day out? Does God give us commands and says, do this? And we go, but I got better things to do. Yes.
To this point, it reminds me of Moses making the excuses, and he's talking directly to God, and you said, if God came to you and said something, well, he has come to us and said to do certain things.
Yep.
And yet, we make excuses for why we haven't done them.
Yeah.
And so, we can do that.
Oh, yeah, and we do it, honestly, day in and day out. We make an excuse as to why we haven't done something, right? Well, I just ran out of time, or I just did this, or, if I would have said something, this might have, right? Exact same thing Moses did. We have to remember, when we're reading these historical accounts in the Old Testament, these are people just like us, right? These aren't like some virtuous, people who are like, oh, they're so better than all of us. And that's what, no, God chose regular people then, just like he does today, to carry out his will. Any other thoughts before we move on? Yep.
We're going to see how the Israelites react to this situation. I mean, we already see how the Israelite foremen are getting beaten, and they're going to cry out, and they're going to say, why? But chapter 4 ends with, after the people saw the signs that Moses and Aaron performed for them, they bowed down in worship,
Yep.
and they were happy. But when things turned sour, they turned sour toward God.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
They are human.
Yes, very human. And we're going to see that here real quick. All right, somebody read verses 15 through the end of the chapter, please. 15 through 23.
Why do you treat your servants like this? No straw is given to your servants, yet they say to us, make bricks. And behold, your servants are beaten, but the fault is in your own people. But he said, you are idle, you are idle. That is why you say, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Go now and work. No straw will be given you, but you must still deliver the same number of bricks. The foremen of the people of Israel saw that they were in trouble when they said, you shall by no means reduce your number of bricks, your daily task each day. They met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them, as they came out from Pharaoh. And they said to them, the Lord look on you and judge, because you have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants. You have put a sword in their hand to kill us. Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you done this evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all.
All right, perfect. Okay, so the officers over Israel, they're getting beaten. So who do they go talk to? Not Moses yet. Pharaoh, first off, right? They go to Pharaoh, and they basically say, hey, do you realize what's going on here, right? You're asking us for this quota here, but your people are doing things to not help us, right? Kind of like what we talked about. You're hurting yourself. Do you realize this? And what's Pharaoh's answer? You're what? You're lazy. You're idle. You're lazy, right? This is the only reason why you're coming and complaining to me. If you have enough time to ask me for 3 days to go worship Yahweh, well, guess what? You have more than enough time to go gather straw to make bricks, right? You're all just being lazy. Get out of my sight. Go make your bricks. And what do the people of Israel realize? We're in what? We're in big time trouble, right? Because we know we can't make this. Pharaoh obviously is fine with the idea, and we're just going to keep getting beat for missing these quotas. So then who do they go and talk to? Who do they go and blame? Yeah, it almost seems like they run into him, right? Like they're walking, and then, oh, here comes Moses and Aaron. Hey, you guys. I want you to look real quick at verse 21. And it says, and he said to them, and they said to them, so the officers of Israel said to Moses and Aaron, Yahweh look upon you and judge, because you have made our Savior to be a horde in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of his servants to put a sword in their hand to slay us. What are they accusing Moses and Aaron of? What are you doing? Making it tough on them, but what specifically do they say? They say, you're making it tough on us, but we've become a stench to Pharaoh. You've actually brought down the name of God by what you're doing, right? Go back to chapter 4 and look at verse 31. What was their reaction when Moses and Aaron first showed up? Somebody read chapter 4, verse 31. They believed, right? It says, and the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and he had looked upon their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. Right? So when they first see Moses and Aaron, Ron and then Roger. Yeah.
I think it's interesting for us to think about the fact that the time that they've been in Egypt, they had Joseph there. They still have the memorial. His body is there
Yeah.
I'm saying that to me, there's a lack of God in their presence. And so this that's happening, they may understand because of the promise to Abraham and so forth. But it's still, there's a whole lot that they don't understand what's happening.
Exactly, right? There is a whole bunch they don't understand. Roger, do you have a point?
What the people are doing, and Moses' reaction is really similar to us sometimes. God will sometimes allow things to be really bad so that we might really appreciate His grace, His love, and He be glorified. And then also, when we hear the news or we read the paper, or listen to the radio, we think things are so bad, the economy's going bad, and what are we going to do? We're like, how are we going to get through all this, and where's God? And we focus on that and forget about God's promises. God said that He's going to deliver them. God said He's not going to forsake us or forget us, but we tend to forget that. And these people in chapter 4 heard it, saw the signs that Moses showed them, and they worshiped God. But now, when things go bad, don't go their way. And we're going to see it later in Exodus when they exit Egypt. They're going to complain when things go bad. So it's human nature to do that. But we always have to keep our focus on the promises of God.
Yeah, exactly, right? And that's a very good point is, again, when you look at this, right, bring it back to our own lives, okay? When you're a new Christian, when you're baptized, right, how are you? Are you just kind of like, eh? You're on fire, right? You're like, this is amazing. This is a great thing that God has done for me. I want to tell everybody about it. And then you go and tell somebody, and they say no, and then you go, ugh, right? But God, you said, right? And this is what has happened to Israel now. Moses comes, he says, I'm going to save you. God has sent me here. All right, let's go. Hey, Pharaoh, let us go worship. And Pharaoh says no, and the people of Israel go, oh. But God, Moses, Aaron, you guys said, God said this, and this is what you're doing now, right? Yes?
And this is definitely the part where I see myself
Yep.
in, because the idea of, things are going good, or you're looking up, and then something hard happens, and you stop and you're like, well, why are you letting this happen to me? Like, why am I having to suffer? Why am I having to go through something difficult, but not being able to see the big picture of what life is going to be on the other side of that difficulty? And just to see, even God's response to them there at the beginning of chapter 6, like, Moses turns around and is also not seeing the big picture, and he's saying, yeah, God, why? Why is this happening? And God doesn't even really respond in anger. He's just like, just wait. Now
Yeah.
what I'm going to do to Pharaoh,
Yep.
telling them, like, you don't see the full picture yet.
Yeah, exactly. See.
And it should help us to understand the trust that we have to put in God, that even though things aren't going the way we think they should, or He's not answering our prayers the way we think He should, He knows best because He sees everything. He sees the long game that He's going for. It reminds me of Job when the opening scene, you see Satan going before God, and God holds Job up and says, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan says, oh yeah, but if you do this and that. Job didn't know that. He couldn't see why he was suffering, although we get that insight, and it helps us to understand what's happening. We don't know what God's got planned for next year or the next 10 years based on what's happening now. We just have to understand that God's in control and trust Him and roll with it and do the best we can, because that's all He's asking us to do. He wasn't asking the Israelites to be able to get to go and do this. He knew it wasn't going to happen, but He still had to do it.
Yep.
And that's part of the hardening of His heart.
Yeah, exactly, too. What's interesting about this, right, and Aaron brought it up, is people go and complain to Moses and Aaron, say, you've done this. And so Moses turns around and he says, no, guys, you all just calm down. This is all okay. No, what does Moses then turn around and do? He starts to complain to God, right, and doubt. What does he say? He says, God, you said You were going to deliver the people. You haven't delivered them. And what does this remind us of? What happens? Yeah, look at Genesis chapter 3, right? First off, how did he make Eve sin? What did he make her do?
He just changed one word.
He deceived her. He caused doubt in her, right? Did God really say this? Right? And all of a sudden that doubt creeps into her and she goes, well, I don't know. Did God really say that? Did he really mean that I was going to die? Did he really mean that? Right? Once that doubt creeps in, Satan then just, and if you notice, after he says that, does it say, then Satan sat around and he had a long conversation with her and he convinced her? No. He said it and just went away. He did his job. He created doubt. And that's what he's doing here with the people of Israel, right? He's creating that doubt in Moses and in Aaron of, did God really say he was going to deliver you? Yes, Ron. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Somebody go back to Exodus 4 and look at verses 21 through 23. Exodus chapter 4, verses 21 through 23, if somebody could read that.
Adonai said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do all the wonders before Pharaoh that I have put in your hand. Still, I will harden his heart, and he will not let the people go. You are to say to Pharaoh, this is what Adonai says, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I have said to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But you have refused to let him go. Behold, I will slay your son, your firstborn.
Perfect. Okay. When God is giving Moses this mission, right, and he's finally convinced Moses to go, Moses is what you're going to do. You have your staff, you have your hand, you're going to do all these miracles before him. And then he said, and once you do this, Pharaoh is just going to be happy. He's going to let you go. No, what does he say? He says what? Pharaoh's going to say no. Right? And not only that, Pharaoh's going to say no. And what is your response going to be to him? Israel is my son. Right? Again, back to that argument of whose people is it? God says, you're going to tell him Israel is my son. And if you don't let him go, what am I going to do to your son, your firstborn sons? I'm going to kill him. Right? And eventually we'll see this all play out. But again, right, now we have this moment here where Moses and the people of Israel are doubting God or questioning God of, hey, right, what's going on? What's the plan? Did God already tell Moses the plan? He gave him the high points, right? He didn't say, okay, I'm going to do this plague and I'm going to do this plague. No, he says, you're going to do this. Pharaoh's going to say this. You're going to tell him this. Now, has God today told us what's going to happen in our lives? We have the highlights. Right? We know about a resurrection. We know that, right, unless Jesus comes back, we're going to die. But God has told us to do what as Christians? Trust Him. But what do we need to do to the world? Spread the word. Go tell people about Jesus. Go tell them about God. And does Jesus say, hey, the world loved me so much, they're going to love you for doing this. They're just going to thank you so much for it. No, what does He say? They're going to hate you, right? The world hated me, so they're going to hate you. We know all this, right? We read it, we believe it, but then when it happens, what do we do as people? We turn around to God and say, hey, what gives? I thought you had a plan. I thought you were going to do something about this. Right? At the same time, we look at Israel and say, how could they do this? But then we turn around every day and say, well, they're not listening to me, God. I'm trying. They're not listening to me. Right? Any thoughts on that? We got like 1 minute left.
Poetic in God's message turn on the messenger. But those who accept the message as being from God and it brings salvation, they'll turn around and say, how blessed are the feet of those who come in the name of the Lord.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And again, right, it all comes down to Satan's best trick is, I just need to make you doubt. If I can make you doubt what God says, you and your human nature and just us as dumb people, for lack of a better term, we'll take care of the rest, right? As long as Satan just puts in that little doubt. And again, it's not anything new. It was literally the first trick he pulled on humanity was, I'm just going to make you doubt. He's doing it again here to the Israelites and to Moses and Aaron. I just need to make them doubt. And then we're going to see, though, in chapter 6, how God kind of lays out the plan further, maybe a little bit more detail, and then reassures Moses and says, no, hold on, right? Remember the things that we've done here. All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate it, and we will pick up on Sunday.